So a little bit of a change of pace. You have your, if you want to look at it. Okay. So a little bit of a change of pace in terms of the Midrash. We have we just read this past Shabbat Parashat HaChodesh, which is basically where the Torah tells us in Parashat Bo that not only is Nisan the beginning of the biblical year, but that one of the things that we do in accordance with the Chagim or the Chag that occurs in Nisan, Chag Pessah, is that everyone is obligated right from the beginning of this month to begin looking for their Pascal sacrifice. It's either a goat or a lamb, both of which are kosher for the sacrifice. And this happens to be a feature of the entire month, meaning you take this animal, you're supposed to tend to it, take care of it, and ultimately it needs to be slaughtered from the middle of the day on Erev Pesach, which is really what's called Chag Pesach. It's when the sacrifice is brought. And you have until the middle of the night to finish. You have to slaughter it, you have to skin it, you have to gut it, you have to roast it, and then you have to eat at least a kazait in order to fulfill your obligation.
You have to burn the rest
midnight.
Before
After midnight, you have to burn the rest of it. Really, you have until the dawn in order to fulfill this obligation, except that chances are, if you're eating and drinking 4 cups of wine, a little bit of goat and lamb, and Rabbi Shimon is a better man than me, but I'm more likely than not to fall asleep at some point, and I will have violated the interdiction of leaving the sacrifice out after dawn.
And so you have to get it as early as possible in Nisan, or possibly, let's say this year we have Bet HaMikdash, could I just go there and start my own business of selling lambs and goats right at the entrance of Yerushalayim?
So you think you invented the free market. The free market thinks that's very funny. The reality is that in biblical times, the animals got progressively more expensive the closer you were to Yerushalayim. And the idea was, it was a risk-reward kind of situation where, by the way, you've been to the Kotel before, yeah?
Yes.
So not the subterranean tunnels, which now is a bit of sediment, but there's like a little bit of a cave off to your left.
Yes.
That's actually the ancient lamb market. In other words, that's where you could buy, probably at the highest markup, lambs that had been inspected by the Sanhedrin and were found to be without blemishes, without any handicaps, no...
yeah, but then if you open it and the lungs are...
still in theory you have a problem, right? Yeah. But the chances of that happening are probably worse if you're dragging the thing from Baghdad or from Kabul, Afghanistan, all the way to Yerushalayim. So if you want to take the chance of bringing your own animal, you have to feed it, you have to give it water during the day, you have to protect it from predators, you have to protect it from thieves. At some point, it becomes too much of a headache to handle.
So technically, when it actually happens, it will probably happen there, or at the entrance of Yerushalayim or something like that.
So maybe not. It all depends. If you're raising your own animals and you're competent at this, you do it ahead of time, you might not have too many difficulties. That just means you're leaving home early and you're traveling at a decent pace.
Yeah, well, I still have to practice for that. Raising my animals.
We'll get there. Raising animals.
Trying to raise my kids also already
is a challenge. Raising animals isn't necessarily any easier, but the consequences are much tastier. So the way it works with the Pesach is as follows. When we were in Egypt and we were told everybody's taking a lamb, okay, this is Rosh Chodesh Nisan, this is officially 2 full weeks before we actually left Egypt. And so what we were doing was an act of faith, an act of emunah. I'm taking the animal that these people worship as a god. I'm basically tying it up, confining it in my quarters, and we're going to be feeding it and fattening it up in order to kill it and eat it. And so this was a very big deal in the context of the original Exodus from Egypt, where it wasn't just that I'm bringing a sacrifice, it wasn't just that we're spit roasting an entire lamb. Think about this, if it was cut in pieces, I could always say it was something else, right? If it's a whole lamb, you're roasting a whole lamb. It's very hard to miss. So what happens, what's the meaning behind this, is that we're putting on prominent display, we're making a public announcement that this is the animal that you people believe to be holy, and we're going to consume it, and it's going to satiate us, and then we're going to burn what's left, so don't even tell me you're going to eat from the leftovers. That's it. It was a one-night thing. Do we in subsequent years have a mitzvah to go ahead and procure the animal? So chances are it suffices that you have a goat or a lamb that you can sacrifice on Pesach. I can prove to you that it's not necessary, because the reality is, if Dawid can't afford a goat or a lamb, but Rabbi Shimon can, so he's going to partner with him. One of them is going to buy it, and the other one's just going to wait until it's sacrificed, and they'll split it. They'll have the seder together on Pesach. As long as they can agree on what house to eat it in, they're not allowed to take any of the meat outside. So it's not that it's an obligation on each and every one to find his lamb. It's that really this would be the appropriate time in the context of the original Pesach This was an extra feat of emunah, an extra demonstration of emunah, where I believe that Hashem is going to protect me. I believe that I can do something so audacious as to take the God of this nation, slaughter it, prepare it for slaughter, and then ultimately eat it, and that no harm will come my way. And then we put the blood, outside the doorpost, etc. That was taking it an extra step further. So, if anyone would like to read, feel free, David. We're the second line from the top, with the siman bet until the middle, where there's a gimel at the beginning of the line, or towards the beginning of the line.
No.
Davar Acher means it's the same pasuk that we have a previous midrash. Here's another interpretation of the same pasuk.
זו החוקה לפסח.
זה שאמר הכתוב.
זה שאמר הכתוב והיא לוי תמים בחוקיך. So
this pasuk, a verse from elsewhere in scripture, this is from Tehillim. Yehi libi tamim b'chukecha. So Leman lo evosh. This is a pasuk in Kuf Yotet in Tehillim, where David HaMelech says, "May my heart be complete, be whole b'chukecha." The word chok in Hebrew means what, David?
Law.
So it's a law, technically, literally, yes.
That is not. That doesn't have a rational explanation.
The connotation is that it's a law that, in part or in whole, does not have any binding, necessarily human logic to it. There are mitzvot that you do because Hashem told you to, and also because they're logical. The classic example of this, kivud avayim. Honor your parents. Why? They're older than you, they're more experienced than you, they're more knowledgeable than you. There's no reason you shouldn't honor your parents. And the Ben Ish Chai points out, even cultures that don't have Torah, they have honoring their parents, like the Asiatic cultures do. When David HaMelech says, I want my heart to be complete, like I want total understanding, b'chukecha, in your not necessarily logical, not necessarily rational laws. I'm not going to say illogical or irrational, but not necessarily rational or logical. So what is it that he's referring to? Amar David.
הריבון העולם כשאני עוסק בחוקיך לא יהיה רשות ליצר הרע להציץ בי.
So David says, Master of the universe, when I am analyzing, when I'm studying your chukim, these not necessarily logical laws, lo yeh reshut yetzer hara lehatzitz bi. May yetzer hara not have the permission to put its eyes on me.
שנאמר, אורני השם דרכיך,
אהלך
בעמיתך.
So as the pasuk says elsewhere in Tehillim, teach me Hashem your ways, ahalech ba'amitecha. I shall walk in your truth.
שלא יעתה אותי
יצר הרע. So my yetzer hara should not cause me to make mistakes or lead me astray. Meaning, you're studying something very deep, something very abstract, where you know as a given that logic is not necessarily the foundation of this mitzvah, meaning not human logic anyway. There's a divine logic to it, not necessarily human logic. Very easy to misunderstand. And so David prays for extra protection when he's studying the depth of these deepest mitzvot, so as to not make mistakes and not to jump to conclusions. Okay, so Shulat Eoti Yetzer Hara. So Yetzer Hara should not cause me to make mistakes.
ואני מתבייש מן הצדיקים.
And it shouldn't bring me to be ashamed, to be embarrassed in the presence of tzaddikim. Presumptively tzaddikim who observe these mitzvot without questioning them. I shouldn't come to the wrong conclusion or come to to a wrong or mistaken perspective about these mitzvot and be embarrassed by the tzaddikim who perform them without trying to understand them the way that I did.
ועוד שמתוך שהוא מתאה אותי אני מונע עצמי מדברי תורה.
So and not only this, but from out of this situation where the Yetzer Hara causes me to make mistakes, אני מונע עצמי מדברי תורה. I'm actually preventing myself from learning Torah. Meaning I thought what I was learning was Torah, but really I came to some crazy conclusion that's not even on target. ואני בא
להשמיע תלמודי לפניך וקטנים ממני הם משיבים ואומרים אינו כך ואני מתבייש.
So, and what will happen is that I'll try to understand something, I'll learn it wrong, and when I come to recite my learning and my conclusions before you, qatanim mimeni, people who are less knowledgeable than me will jump up and retort, and they'll say, it's not the way you're saying, but rather it's like this, vani mitbayesh, and I'll ultimately be embarrassed. Ela, but rather, so instead of all this happening,
ואני בלש ואני מדרש אלא עשה ליבי אחד כדי שיהיה עוסק בתורה בתמות.
Right, like tmimut we would say. But rather make my heart one, unify my heart, so that I should be studying from your Torah with wholeness, with completion. We'll talk about this. Hadav dichtiv, yehi libi tamim b'chukecha, l'ma'an lo yevosh. So this is technically the first half of the Midrash. Here is where it takes a little bit of a funny twist. So I'll read this just for the sake of time because we started late. Another interpretation of this pasuk, Yehi libi tamim b'chukecha, zot Huqah Pessah, or Huqah Pessah, is how we read it. Bechukat Parah Adumah. This is, what is David HaMelech talking about? What's he praying for all this help? Like he literally needs supernatural intervention, divine intervention, in order to study what? Huqah Pessah, Bechukat Parah Adumah. Two parashiyot in the Torah, we have a few. But two parashot in the Torah that are introduced as a Huqah, where we say, look, the rationale is not necessarily a human one. A person would not necessarily come to these conclusions. Parah Adumah, we just discussed. Incidentally, we started talking about the month of Nisan. So the Shabbat before the month of Nisan, Shabbat Parashat Parah, is one of these four special parashot that we read after, between the beginning of Adar and the end of the month of Adar, before the month of Nisan, or on Rosh Chodesh as it was this past Shabbat, where Parah Adumah, we read and remind ourselves of this formula of how we purify ourselves from the worst form of impurity. In Olam Hazeh, has to do with a red heifer, a young female cow, less than 1 year old, that has never drawn any load, never pulled anything, never had anybody ride on it, etc. So this is described as a Huqah. Purity and impurity are not necessarily concepts that we as human beings would understand. If it were up to me and I had to make predictions, I would predict that Washington, D.C. would be the ultimate source of impurity in the entire world. Politicians being what they are and doing what they do. I know it's an election year, Dawid. I'm not going to get into the details of the platforms and the different politicians. But at the end of the day, the ultimate form of impurity in this world that smells even worse than a rotting human cadaver is politicians. Really, we find out that the forms of purity or impurity are a little bit more mysterious to us than this. On the one hand, you have a human cadaver. At the same time, you have a woman who just had a baby, also in a certain form of impurity. Husband and wife that have relations according to halakha, in theory, come out of it with a light form of tum'ah, of impurity. So it's not necessarily a logical, rational thing. Why is the Pesach considered a Huqah? Where we will look into this a little bit. What's the Huqah about the Pesach? Didn't we just discuss this? As an introduction to this entire concept, we talked about the fact the Egyptians worshipped lambs, or maybe they worshipped lambs and goats together. Really, either one of them was good for a Pesach, so it seems like they weren't so discriminate in terms of the ruminant mammals that they worshipped. But I thought the logic was pretty simple. This is a culture that worships lambs, just like the Indians today revere cows, and we have an obligation to take them, to confine them, to feed them, to fatten them up, to sacrifice them, to eat from them. In fact, there's a Midrash that points out that we do this on the 15th of the month, or the end of the 14th, beginning of the 15th, because that's when the moon is at its fullest, in terms of the phases of the moon. And so you have a bright sun shining in the middle of the day, you have the moon shining at night. Don't tell me I'm slaughtering the animal at night so as to escape the attention of the people who might be looking on. Where's the Huqah aspect of this? What about this mitzvah is not so understood? I'm asking a humble question. I don't know. Feel free to intervene. The Midrash just told you it's a Huqah. The Huqah of the Parah Adumah, this I can see. What's logical about the Parah Adumah? The fact that it's red, the fact that it's a female, the fact that it's younger than a year, the fact that it never pulled any weight, that it never carried any load. This is logical that my purity should come from a cow? Maybe if we slaughtered, disemboweled, and burned a politician, and we offered him as a sacrifice to the Satan, maybe we can make a case for our purity coming from efforts that we've made on behalf of chlorinating the human gene pool and ridding ourselves of the contaminating effects of corrupt politicians. But at the end of the day, it seems like this is much easier for us to understand as a Huqah because the rules aren't necessarily logical. Whereas the Pesach seems the exact opposite. This is probably the single most logical sacrifice in the entire Torah. Why should it even be the case that I bring a sacrifice and it achieves some kind of atonement or some kind of forgiveness for me? What did the goat do that by slaughtering it and by burning its pieces on the Mizbeach, all of a sudden I become a better person? So clearly it's not that simple, and obviously there are other components to this. But why does that even make sense? Why does that even register?
There is like there is a way to explain it to a 5 years old. You would say, so if you upset someone, if you do something wrong with regards to someone, you are going to bring something that you care, or bring a gift in order to apologize. You upset your wife, you bring her flowers or something else. You upset God, you bring him a lamb. Why is it a lamb? It's something that is, or an animal is something that has value to you, that you believe in order to show your teshuvah in a way.
We've discussed the sacrificial concept.
So there is this
there's a concept
as well.
So first of all, it's valuable.
Yeah.
But I could have given money. I could have given the same amount of money. I could have given it to tzedakah instead of giving it to.
If you're going to end up eating it, you're not really giving away anything.
So maybe if it's a Qorban that we're bringing because of something I did wrong, probably the Kohen is going to be eating from it. So already it's not going directly to me or to my pocket or to my waistline.
So it's the same thing as if you give money in a way, because the Kohanim will have some...
Right, you would say. There's another feature of this. See, again, you have to piece these things together from other Midrashim. The Midrashim don't give you everything in one sitting. They give you little bits and pieces on a spoonful. So there's another aspect of this, which is that the animals have a very similar anatomy to ours. And when we place the animal's head on the Mizbeach, the Midrash explains, the kavanah I'm supposed to have is that my head is the one that thought inappropriate thoughts, that planned this whole fiasco of whatever it is that I did wrong. My arms are the ones that performed or executed this avirah. My legs are the ones that carried me to the situation where I did what I did. If I ate something forbidden, the animal has its intestines removed also. So there's a cathartic experience to be had by sacrificing something similar to you. We stop short of sacrificing people. If I had it my way, maybe we'd introduce it. But at the end of the day, it's something that we don't do because Hashem doesn't want us to empty the world of people, doesn't want death and destruction to be the result of our negative actions. Just like Hashem is merciful, and He gives us forgiveness and the opportunity to continue our lives, so He does want this cathartic experience, but not to come through bloodshed, and therefore, the Midrash explains, He gave us the permission to sacrifice something close to, similar to us, in order to achieve a certain effect. Now, I get that. That's still more explicable, first of all, than the Parah Adumah, which is more a function of purifying me, my physical body, that's now been contaminated. Second of all, the Qorban Pessah isn't even a forgiveness or atonement related sacrifice. I'm not bringing this because I did something wrong. In fact, if I don't bring it, I did something wrong, and then I have to, if under certain circumstances, make it up. How is it possible that this sacrifice, the one sacrifice you could say that we're not, I can volunteer a sacrifice, I can offer as a gift, as a donation, as a contribution to Beit HaMikdash, want to help out the Kohanim. Why is the one sacrifice that we bring that isn't atonement related the one that's considered a Huqah?
Is there anything to do with the concept of Huqah itself? In the sense that exactly the Qorban that will make more sense of anything, the Qorban that will do, I would say, almost naturally because of what you represent, you still have to do it as a Huqah. You still have to approach it as, this is a Huqah no matter what. Don't give an intention, you can give intention, but the truth is, no matter what intention you have, this is still a Huqah. It's
there's a comment made by the Tur on Hilchot Mizwah, and he brings together a whole bunch of sayings from the Gemara. Mizuzot can protect you, they can protect the house, they can squash machlokot, they can help you with your health, your parasat, and if there's a war, you can potentially be protected. And in the end, the Torah says, you shouldn't have any of this in mind, but rather you should say, I'm putting up the mezuzah because the Torah said so. Don't be quick to jump to conclusions as to why we put up mezuzot and what kind of mezuzot you're going to put up. I'm going to write my mezuzah on titanium parchment that's going to save me better than your mezuzah that was written on a goat or a lambskin. Not your job to infuse the action, the performance of the mitzvah with meanings, even if they were endowed upon the concept by Chazal themselves. You don't say, I'm putting up this mitzvah in order to protect my house. You said, but exactly Hashem told me to do it. And if he didn't, I wouldn't have done it. Even the korbanot that we bring on holidays, at the end of the day, are all related to kapara. And we always bring a goat specifically, to There's always a goat, one goat brought on every single holiday that represents, one of these national atonement types of efforts. It seems the tempting conclusion is that every single sacrifice is an effort at purifying or forgiving or purifying ourselves or achieving atonement or forgiveness for ourselves. And it seems that the Qorban Pessah is the one that's prescribed, has nothing to do with who you are or what you did, save for the fact that you're Jewish, you have to do this. On the holidays, by the way, and there are some sacrifices like this, even on Pesach, we have national sacrifices. On Shabbat, the Kohanim, every day, they bring one lamb in the morning, one lamb in the evening. That's the Olat Tamid, that's every day. On Shabbat, we bring 2 extra lambs. On Rosh Chodesh, it's a bull, 2 rams, 7 lambs, a bull, a ram, a goat, and 7 lambs. Sorry. And so all this, why? It's all a function of atonement or forgiveness, but this is the Kohen representing the entire nation with these sacrifices. This, and really there's another form of this, which is the Olat Riyah, that's the Qurban that we bring every time you come to the Beit HaMikdash on the 3 pilgrimages. You bring a separate, unrelated Qurban. You have a Qurban Hagigah, which is also represented on the Seder plate, that's typically represented by the egg. Here, every member of the Jewish nation has to bring this particular sacrifice, and it seems really like there's no other explanation beyond just participation in the holiday. Now, we did this back in the day in Egypt when the culture was idolatrous and they maybe worshipped lambs as some form of deity or some representation of a deity, or perhaps the constellation of Aries. So it's a little bit baffling to us, we'll put it that way. I'll continue in the Midrash, but it's not necessarily going to make the question any easier, it'll just complicate things. So, when David HaMelech says, he's praying to Hashem, my heart should be whole, should be complete when I study your Huqim, your not necessarily logical laws. What's he referring to? Is that Huqah Pessah, Huqah Parah Adumah. Midrash is telling you, here is the secret to that pasuk. These are the 2 Huqim that he's referring to. Lama, sheshnehem domin ze lazeh. Why is this? Because the 2 resemble each other. The Parah Adumah and the Qorban Pessah, they resemble each other. Because this is a male goat or lamb, and because that's a female cow. This one's red, this one we don't care about the color, this one is roasted whole and consumed, this one is burned and the ashes are sprinkled into water. What do they actually have in common? That the Midrash gets away with saying this. So why are they so similar to each other that you can almost not tell them apart? Here it says, this is the Huqah, the law of the Pesach. Parah Adumah, it's a little bit more general. This is like the Huqah of the Torah, the deeper, secret, not so logical commandment that has to do with purity from all forms of impurity. And you, the casual observer, still don't know which Huqah is greater than which. Rabbi Shimon here wants to tell me, wait a second, if the Parah Adumah is called Huqat Torah, this is the Huq that upon which the entire Torah is based, and this one is just called Huqah Pesach, naturally I would say, I'd be more inclined to say Parah Adumah is bigger. But you still, in theory, don't know which one is greater than one. Mashal, and this is great, but we haven't done a Midrash that has a Mashal just yet. Mashal, in the Midrash, always means it's a parable, it's some kind of metaphor. Mashal, Lishte Matroniot, right? Matrona is, in the language of the Midrash, is an important woman, a dignified woman. So mashal lishtei matroniot. So a metaphor can be given for 2 very dignified women, domot, who are similar to each other. Shahayu mahalchot shtehen ka'achat. They're both walking together. Nirot shavot, and they look practically identical. Mi gedola mizo. Which one is greater than the other one? How do you know which woman is actually of higher status or more important? Otah shehavrata melava otah ad beitah veholechet achareh. The one whose friend, whose companion, walks with her up to her home and then turns around and goes home. Meaning, it's more honorable, more dignified to be accompanied by someone, and only once this accompaniment has been fulfilled would you, the individual of, let's say, lesser status or stature, be then free to go home on your own. You don't need accompaniment, and the more important, more dignified individual does. כך בפסח, נאמר בו חוקה, ובפרה נאמר בה חוקה. So too with Qorban Pessah, the Pesach is called Huqah, the Parah Adumah is called Huqah, ומי גדולה, and which one is greater? הפרה, the Parah Adumah is greater. Why? She'ochlei Pesach tzirichin lah. Because those who eat the Qorban Pessah need first for the Parah Adumah to purify them. So the Parah Adumah is the one that enables me to eat from the Qorban Pessah, and the Pesach can go and take place on its own. This is what you do in order to purify someone. You take to the impure individual from the ashes of the burned hatat, that's a reference to the Parah Adumah. And this comes to explain, or this is what the pasuk means when it says "Kol ben nechar lo yochal bo," no son of a foreigner, meaning no non-Jewish citizen, should eat from the Qorban Pessah. Well, that was easy to understand.
Why do we care which one is the biggest Huqah? Because anyway, we have to do both.
The Midrash cares, so obviously I must.
And the Midrash says that the red heifer is the more important one.
Right. It draws the conclusion for you.
Shouldn't it be that the red heifer? Which one is the one that's being accompanied? Is it the red heifer or the?
In the parable, the way that it's brought down is that the Pesach cannot be brought if you're in a state of impurity.
Right.
And so, how do you purify yourself? You need the Parah Adumah.
Right. So the Pesach is more important.
Meaning, right. The way the Midrash devises it is that the Pesach comes. It needs the accompaniment.
Right.
Or needs to accompany.
It needs to
be accompanied by, however you describe it. The Parah Adumah needs to be there in order for the Pesach to happen.
Right.
Once the Parah Adumah does its thing, the Pesach has to go on its own. Like, this is your own show. The Parah Adumah is always necessary for all other sacrifices.
Right.
And once they're done, the sacrifice can be conducted.
Right.
And once, the Parah Adumah is not there, there's nothing there.
Right.
So Midrash is telling you, because this is like a condition sine qua non,
Yeah.
if this is not present, if it's not there, nothing happens.
Right.
The two in conjunction, the Parah Adumah enables it, and then the rest passes on its own through the Pesach. So very bizarre in terms of a Midrash.
Yeah.
So first of all, who cares which one is bigger? Or which one is greater? And what do they even have in common? Right? I'm still stuck on like a bone in my throat. What does that mean that the Pesach is considered a Huqah? If the idea is that it's in your face to the Egyptians, fine. Maybe that only was valid for the first year. We're no longer in Egypt. Who am I showing this off to? The Egyptians don't worship lambs anymore. They worship Al-Qaeda, they worship ISIL. What do you want? But they don't worship lambs anymore. Why does it matter or make sense that we should still be doing this in their face, not for my own purification, not for my own indulgence, but we offer the sacrifice because we're told that we have to? Why does this register as a Huqah? Why the comparison or the contrast between the two? And how ultimately it gets resolved in favor of the Parah Adumah? Because really there needs to be some kind of purification in order for this to go on, in order for this to happen. So, a couple of thoughts to it. There are references in the Midrash that describe Pesach as a very, very special time. Okay, what happened on the original Pesach, meaning the actual original Exodus from Egypt? We describe this in terms of our national historical trajectory. What exactly happened when we left Egypt?
In terms of the sacrifice that we did, or in general?
No, in general. What happened? Tell me something. What were we doing in Egypt, and what happened when we came out?
We walked in the desert for a long time.
So this is in terms of the itinerary.
Right.
But in terms of let's say status, in terms of defining moments in our history. We were in Egypt as slaves. Now what happens?
We killed some lambs.
Yeah, we killed some lambs.
We killed some lambs.
Lots of collateral damage. We killed a bunch of lambs.
The firstborn dies. Then we get out quickly.
And now we're what?
Slaves of God.
And now we're servants of Hashem, which means we're effectively free of human bondage. We're free of human slavery. And our independence is manifest in our servitude to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Basically, we become a nation. We become a nation based on the Torah, based on the rules that we're given. But we become an independent nation. And the Pesach sacrifice is more than just, I'm going to show the Egyptians what I think of them and their God. This is actually, for a nation that was very assimilated and that was unfortunately very steeped in Egyptian culture and mythology and idolatry, this is an act of faith, first of all, that I don't believe this thing is God, and that I actually do accept another, a much higher deity than anything tangible or physical. Second of all, this Qorban was basically my affirming my faith, my confirming my faith, or reaffirming my faith in HaKadosh Baruch Hu, who's going to protect me, who's going to provide for me, and who ultimately will deliver me from slavery. The promise was already made, right? The secret's out. This is basically the precursor to the plague of the firstborn, after which the Makat Bechorot, after which we officially are ejected from Egypt, and we become a nation. That a nation should go from such a lowly situation, from such a lowly status as slaves, to becoming the nation of God is a tremendous jump in status, right? We're not used to things happening like this. There was no gradual way to go from assimilated into Egyptian culture to a little bit less assimilated, like we don't watch TV one day a week, right, to, we no longer participate in any of their games or sports. This wasn't a very gradual shift. It was a very violent one. It happens to be that the 10 plagues took place over the course of a year. But at the end of the day, the shift, the cultural shift, was a very powerful, very violent one. How do I know that it was powerful and it was violent? Because most of the people didn't survive it. At the end of the day, according to the Midrashim, different numbers that are disputed, it's about 80% of the nations didn't even leave Egypt to begin with. But the ones who didn't go from slave to servant to part-time government employee to official members of the private sector. They went from slaves to practically kings, if you will, or to a nation that has a unique and special relationship with God up to this very day. If you're familiar with this concept, by the way, how do Chazal symbolize this in the Seder? What about the Seder implies this funny contrast between slavery and royalty?
The fact that we're Mesubin, something like that?
The fact that we eat reclining.
Yeah.
The way kings recline. And I've been through this before. Say it again. Reclining means lying down on your side. It means lying down on a sofa, on a mattress, on a couch, on an ottoman, on some piece of furniture, on some, at least cushions or blankets. Literally lying down on your side like an absolute king. I have nowhere to go, I have nothing to do. And at the same time, nowhere to go, nothing to do. How are we commanded to eat? At least the first Qorban Pessah. V'chacha tochlo oto, ma'achelchem b'yadchem, right? Motechem chagurim, ma'achelchem b'yadchem, v'na'alechem b'raglechem. And thus, should you eat the Pesach, your staff should be in your hand, your belt should be tightened, and your shoes should be on your feet.
Because
so as far as the Torah is concerned,
because you're going to go quickly afterwards. You got to be ready to get out, right?
Yes, because ultimately we're going to be leaving Egypt. And so as far as the Torah is concerned, if we're describing the first year of the Exodus, we're leaving Egypt as soon as we're done eating this Qorban. We're going to finish, we already have a matzot, that's it. We're going to have a bite and we got to run, we got to bounce. So we're eating with our staff, with our belt. Where does this concept of hasabah come into the picture? Who tells us that we have to lie down, we have to recline while we're eating? This appears where? It appears in the Mishnah. It appears in the Mishnah. Chazal already are telling us, the first Qorban Pessah that we ate it while holding on to a staff with our shoes on, with our belts fastened, and everybody was scared out of their wits. And they basically were praying this should go over smoothly because we just killed what was probably a few million, or at the very least quite in the high hundreds of thousands of these lambs. The Egyptians are likely not going to be happy with this act. And we're eating and we're fearful. And we have total confidence, we have faith that we're going to leave Egypt, be delivered from slavery into a unique status of, let's say, human royalty, except that it hasn't happened just yet. And Chazal tells us in the Mishnah, really, this entire Seder is marked by 4 cups of wine, which represent the 4 Lashonot HaGeulah, the 4 verbs that are used in describing our redemption. I'm going to take you out of slavery in Egypt. I'm going to save you from this torture. I'm going to redeem you, and I'm going to take you unto me as a nation. So the Qorban Pessah, maybe in contrast to other sacrifices, maybe not even so much, is the sacrifice that changes our status. Okay? Normally, if I have a Qorban that I have to bring, you may or may not be familiar with this from the Mishnah, if I did something wrong, I have to bring a Qorban, right? And so I have what's called Hatat Rovetzetara. I have like a Qorban hovering over my head. Literally, it's an obligation that you have to dispense. You have to do something in order to get rid of it. When you bring a Qorban, the Qorban itself has a transformative capacity. Naturally, it doesn't happen just by virtue of having killed and disemboweled an animal. You go from being a rasha to being a tzaddik. You go from being someone who is negligent, careless in his mitzvot, to someone who's careful about the mitzvot. And this all has to do with your kavanah, with your intentions. So I bring this animal, I need to lean on it, I need to recite some kind of a confession over what it is that I did and some kind of a commitment not to do it again. The animal is sacrificed in my stead, because it really should be me and not the animal that's going on the Mizbeach. And Hashem in His mercy allows me to redeem myself. Right? It's a form of redemption. I did something wrong, I should be punished. But instead of being punished and being executed, I'm basically allowed to bring this sacrifice instead. And the sacrifice helps me, instead of, let's say, atonement or forgiveness, maybe we can call this some kind of a change in status. I go from being guilty to being innocent. I go from owing Hashem for violating His commandments to being back on decent, good terms. What's the purpose of the Parah Adumah? Insofar as we understand anything about it, what's the goal of this particular concept?
It's helping changing your status again.
This is the ultimate change in status. This is where I can take someone who is as impure as they come, unless he's dead. Really, the most impure you can be is someone who's dead, but we can't purify the dead. So I can take someone who came into contact with, or was in the same edifice as a human cadaver, and I can change his status from impure to pure. How is it possible to do such a thing? What logically dictates that should be able to happen? Normally, wherever you find death and decomposition and disintegration, you find that it tends to spread chaotically. Unless you're actively fighting against it, if you were to stand around dead, decomposing, dying people, chances are you would get sick and you'd probably die too. Plagues were passed this way, and it is what it is. The Parah Adumah has this miraculous, divine, perhaps mystical quality to it, that the details of it don't necessarily make logical sense the way that we're used to it, but this is a Qorban that if you adhere to the rules, Hashem promises you in return that He's going to relieve you of your tum'ah. Your status is going to change from someone who is impure, even potentially as impure as it possibly gets, to an individual who's now pure and able to participate in something as official and sacrificial as the Qorban Pessah.
It's a little weird, that we put so much emphasis on killing the Egyptian gods, which were animals, because they don't have any power, and that's why God tells us specifically to sacrifice them and eat them. But yet at the same time, we give that power to another animal. It's ironic, almost.
So here's the point that I'm driving to, or one of the points that I'd like to make. We don't slaughter the Pesach, or we wouldn't when Beit HaMikdash is reconstructed, because the Egyptians are worshipping this animal. The Egyptians are irrelevant. Effectively, they're irrelevant. That expired the first year that we brought up Qorban Pessah. What we're doing from then on is actually an interesting form of transformation, right? Here you're going to have to take, not my word for it, but this is the Arizal. The Arizal explains as follows. This Pesach is a time that's so significant, so holy, and so special, and so capable, that this is the time during which we were redeemed from our slavery, from the lowest possible level. A slave that has no sovereignty. No, you can't make any decisions for yourself. You don't determine or dictate your daily schedule, your daily routine, how much work you have to do, when you get off, etc. We went from being under the absolute and total control of an oppressive and evil government to being completely independent and self-sufficient as a nation. It was a very, very violent transition. It's not that it happened only once or that it was coincidental. It's that this is the nature of Pesach. This is the nature of the month of Nisan. This is the power the month of Nisan has. So he explains. Every year we go from Pesach through Shavuot. We have this concept of Sefirot HaOmer. Every year you're capable of going infinitely higher than you were the year before, as long as you respect the rules, as long as you respect your neshama, as long as you're careful about purity, impurity, etc. The way he describes it, the Torah itself tells us, it's a promise that Hashem makes to Moshe. He says, "V'atem tihiu li mamlechet kohanim v'goy chadosh." Hashem tells Moshe, you're leaving Egypt, you're going to become for me mamlechet kohanim. You're going to be a kingdom of kohanim v'goy chadosh. Now Rizal says mamlechet kohanim almost literally. How is this? Normally, in the typical context of the Mishkan or Beit HaMikdash, the way things work sacrificially is that I or a Kohen do the Shechitah. The Kohen then needs to catch the blood goes in the Mizbeach, the animals taken apart by the Kohanim, different pieces are put on the Mizbeach in a certain sequence, etc. On Pesach, the Arizal explains, we, the simple citizens, temporarily receive the status of Kohanim. This is my own show, this is my own Qorban, this is my own ability to take control of my own nishmatic state. I'm the one who can dictate or determine how pure, how holy, how divine, how special I can become. As usual, there are technical details that apply because this is a fusion between the neshama, which is completely abstract, and the body, which is actually physical. And so there's always some kind of rite or ritual or ceremony. Something physical tangible has to take place in order for the two to cooperate and to work together. But the idea is that we can literally be like Kohanim, where I can purify myself. Right? Follow this. I don't need a Kohen to purify me. I might need the Parah Adumah. In general, my purity has to come from this concept we refer to as Kehuna, from Kohanim. But once that's been accomplished, I can bring my own Qorban Pessah. This is my own sacrifice, my own opportunity to elevate and to uplift everything about my existence. And that's why we continue to celebrate Pesach, we continue to read the Haggadah, we continue to read about going from slavery and suffering and torment and the children being executed to leaving triumphantly into the Egyptians themselves being punished, meaning that's the power of this concept of Pesach. And this all has to do with me making preparations for it. I have to purify myself locally in order for Manashama to be in such a state, such a situation, that I can actually accomplish what it is I'm supposed to accomplish on Pesach. And so this becomes a sacrifice, not to purify myself in theory. Yes, every sacrifice has some aspect of purity to it, but the idea here is that this is a sacrifice that kind of signifies on the one hand, a new beginning, and at the same time, the accomplishment of a much higher and much more capable role. I can't be a Kohen all year long. On Pesach, I can pull this off. A somewhat unrelated drasha of the Arizal, where he described the end of time, the Messianic era, as being a period where whatever's left of humanity graduates. And so the way he describes it, that the Kohanim would all take on a status of something like the Kohen Gadol, the Leviim take on a status like the Kohanim, your standard regular Yisrael takes on a status of a Levi, how the Mamzerim could take a status as regular Yisrael, and how the Umot HaOlam, the nations of the world, get bumped up from being some sort of, let's say, righteous Gentiles, if that's what's left at the end of time, to also some status of what was previously Am Yisrael. Meaning, the purpose of the world is not to continue in perpetuity the way it currently is, where everybody has a defined role and you're stuck there forever. The idea is that we graduate. We go from one stage to another, from one step to another, and in very much the same way that Chazal described what happens after the neshama leaves the body. After the neshama leaves the body, Chazal said, what is Olam Haba like? Gam barachot ya'ateh moreh yelechu mechayil l'chayil. Here the Gemara says that the tzaddikim, they have no rest, not on Olam Hazeh, not even Olam Haba. Why? Because the pasuk says, we read it in Tehillim by Mincha, Gam barachot ya'ateh moreh, blessings too shall one who teaches, enshroud himself in or bring upon himself. Yelechu mechayil l'chayil. They go from one accomplishment, one achievement to the next. So tell me, someone who spends his whole life achieving and accomplishing things in Olam Hazeh, he gets to retire. That's it. Boker Raton, God's waiting room. You go down to Olam Haba and you play backgammon, sheshbesh over tea and pistachios at the beach. No, you set a tone, you set a pace, you set some kind of momentum for yourself in Olam Hazeh, and your neshama continues on the same trajectory over infinite different levels that it can potentially occupy and that make up the space, so to speak, between you and HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And the higher, the faster, the more ambitiously you try to grow and to graduate from one level to the next, the less room you have to make up, so to speak, in Olam Haba. But never is there a situation of stasis. You're never actually sitting still, never actually doing absolutely nothing. So the Parah Adumah, in a way, is there to bring you from bad to good, from impure to potential for purity. Whereas the Qorban Pessah, if you're asking me why might I have been inclined to think the Pesach might even be on a higher level, true, I need to be pure in order to bring it, and I can't bring it when I'm in a state of impurity. I have to try the next time, the Pesach Sheni. And I'm not allowed to feed from the Pesach to anyone who's not of the same status as me, which is at least Israel and beyond. But the Pesach itself represents an opportunity for me to take control over my own destiny, to temporarily fill the shoes of a Kohen, which is really the ultimate goal for me to reach a point where, to put it otherwise, my purity, my Kedusha, my Tahara, my holiness and my purity no longer depend on the Kohanim. Right? Where I as a Kohen can get my purity from peers as opposed to superiors. Someone who's spiritually superior to me. Nishmatic libertarianism, if you insist you on, but the idea is that ultimately we all strive for independence and for establishing our own relationship with the Kadosh Baruch Hu, which, by the way, the Navi Yeshaya promises us, where he says, at the end of time, there will come a time where people thirst for the, they hunger and not for bread, they thirst and not for water, but rather to hear the word of Hashem directly from Hashem. And we're told as part of this promise, we'll no longer need one for the other in order to receive or interpret the word of Hashem. So, no offense to rabbis, wherever they may be, and whatever capacity they're employed in. But the goal is that individuals should be able to receive their own prophecy too. Why should I have to turn to someone else to get halachic rulings or to get prophecy? Well, if I'm in a state of impurity, or in a state of spiritual inferiority, or if I'm just not that learned or not that knowledgeable, clearly, just like you would in medicine and you would in finances, you would in anything else, go to someone who knows more than you and get advice from someone who's an expert in the field. But this isn't the goal. And just like in terms of prophecy, in terms of my relationship with the Kadosh Baruch Hu, ultimately our goal should be, it must be, the Prophet tells us it has to be, to receive my own prophecy, to become spiritually independent of anyone else, to maximize my own nishmatic potential. So too, when it comes to my own actions, my own deeds, and even my ability to perform and influence in Olam Hazeh, the goal would be the Qorban Pessah. Now, I need the Parah Adumah, so the Pesach accompanies the Parah Adumah and then gets to do its own thing, in the language of the Midrash. Really, ideally, in a world in a better state of repair than it currently is, the Pesach would be we would no longer need the Parah Adumah, put it that way. Once we achieve a certain basic level of purity, we're all able to go ahead and progress on our own, with our own prophetic instinct, our own prophetic intuition, and our own ability to make prophetic determinations and distinctions based on what it is that we experience and not just what someone else tells us. So right now, I depend on the Kohanim in order for this to get done. Right now, it would be an avirah. There would be an abuse of the highest order to pretend that I'm able to purify myself or that I'm pure enough to do this without the Kohanim, without going through the system. But that's only because this is where we are spiritually speaking, in a state of dependence, in a state where... But by the way, and it's funny, on a totally moral note, it happened to be just a week ago or a week and a half ago that the Rabbanut in Israel was compelled by the High Court to begin to accept the rulings, particularly as they pertain to Giyur, to conversions, from other entities. However they're defined, it's not so clear. I've been advocating for this for about 20 years, but I'm glad that it finally happened. The beginning of the privatization of this monopoly over religion is really only going to benefit everyone. In other words, the less dependent we become on one central authority with all of its advantages, disadvantages, political inclinations, etc., the better, the cleaner the air we're all going to breathe when we're able to take things back to a case-by-case basis, when things are able to go back to, being more local, more individual, less mechanical, less industrial in terms of...
How can you ensure that they're all Orthodox?
You can't. How can you make sure now that they're all Orthodox?
Well, because the central rabbinate is Orthodox.
Because the same Rabbanut that decided all the Ethiopians have to convert until they rebelled and then they stopped is the same Rabbanut that decided the Russians don't have to because they would fight with us and they wouldn't do it. You're trying to tell me they operate free and clear of any political inclinations or influences? Or
no,
pressures?
But let's say that most of the time...
I want to believe that. I want to believe that you believe that, but you know this isn't the case.
Let's say at least they're Shema Shabbat.
The Rabbanut.
Kind of.
I'm not calling into question the Rabbanut and their Shemirat Shabbat. I'm calling into question their ability to make decisions independently, competently.
That I agree.
Consistently. without the influence of outside factors. Now, if the Rabbanut itself is subject to the rulings of the High Court of Israel, so the Supreme Court, it's already a joke. In the sense of, what would the Supreme Court possibly change in terms of halakha? They're not well read. They're not versed in halakha. Yeah, what I'm laughing about is the fact that if someone's giving control over the spiritual responsibilities in Israel, the system itself has to be more, I'm not going to say democratic, I'm going to say transparent. That's exactly what they said. It began with a ruling that said the Rabbanut has to publicize lists of the rabbis they accept and the rabbis they don't accept. That's when everything fell apart for the Rabbanut. Because up until then, it was in their discretion. So there's a rabbi in Colombia who officiates conversions, and I don't like him, but the one in Venezuela, we accept him. So what I live in Colombia, what do? I have to move to Israel in order to become Jewish?
Yeah, but that's different. Like here, you are opening up to a woman rabbi.
She could do it anyway.
How?
So she does it without the stamp of the Rabbanut, but the Rabbanut stamp is worthless anyhow, is what I'm telling you. There are converts who've gone through hell and high water in Israel, and for no good reason, and there are people who got converted through a back door for no good reason either. You mean to tell me that all the converts that went through the Rabbanut in Israel are all tzaddikim? I would love to believe this. Show me the evidence. My point is that it's an unhealthy dependence. And by the way, I'm not the only one who says this. Or Sabato used to tell us this for years when I was in yeshiva. So the same thing. Privatize religion. Let people seek out the leaders they choose without any political intervention, without the intervention of secular bodies that determine or decide who's eligible for a job as a judge or as a rabbi of a city, of a town, of a village. What's the point of having political influence over these decisions?
On principle, I agree, but that's what happened in America, pretty much. In America, it's very...
Nothing happened in America. No one even attempted to...
So that's the way it's been. I mean, that's pretty much the way it's been forever. It's been completely private, and what happens is that you have a minority of Orthodox communities and a majority of Reform and Conservative.
Right, and has the world come to a screeching halt?
No, but we've been talking about this last time, that it's a challenge now to officiate weddings.
Just now, there was an article this weekend I saw about a woman in Randolph, New Jersey now. She's the first Orthodox woman rabbi, or self-proclaimed, self-professed Orthodox woman rabbi of a community in New Jersey. Whether you accept this or you don't accept this is fine. Here in America, what happens is that these larger institutions need to negotiate. They need to figure out where they stand on a whole variety of issues. So Reform would embrace this, Conservative would embrace this. Well, maybe not because she's Orthodox, but the RCA, Rabbinical Council of America, which is effectively like the modern Orthodox, say the mothership of the modern Orthodox movement, they issued a number of statements in which they generally said this violates the customary practices of Orthodox Judaism. In other words, we're not going to encourage women to become rabbis because this is going to change. When a woman becomes a rabbi, she moves from community to community. She may not be inclined to have a family or want one. It could be disruptive, to the way that Orthodox Jewish life has typically been lived up until now. So I got into some discussions with some of the guys and some of my colleagues on Facebook. It's fine. They're trying to maintain legitimacy in the eyes of the Haredi community, and they're trying not to lose contact. Like, they responded to it. The Haredi community didn't even respond to this. They don't care. It doesn't happen. It doesn't work. It doesn't fly by us, and that's it. And so here what you have is a situation where all these organizations are forced into transparency. Everybody's forced to tell you exactly what they think, what they believe, and why. You choose where you want to go, okay? Why? There's no Reform Jews in Israel. There's no conservative movement. Not very strong.
The movement is like even you're a non-observant Jew. If he goes to the shul once a year for Yom Kippur, he's still gonna go to an Orthodox shul. So at least the one time he goes, he does it right.
Has the Rabbanut solved the issue of Jews living a secular lifestyle and not observing mitzvot?
No. But
have they made it better? Have they made it worse? No, but it happens anyway. It doesn't matter. It happens anyway. Here in America, you know what you're getting. That's it. They'll tell you. Here's the deal. It's this way. It's that way. It's transparent. It's open. You want to read our bylaws, our protocols, our principles, our procedures. Go right ahead. You don't like them, you go somewhere else. What's not very productive to the soul. And by the way, this is the way debate and dispute have been going on for probably the past 40 or 50 years. And people are just shouting louder and louder. I don't think we're making any progress in terms of discovering new ways of looking at things or coming up with more logical, more rational, more sound halachic rulings. I think people just shout louder and drown the other side out, and it's not like we're having a debate or a discussion. It's really become more violent, even more intellectually violent. I don't think we're actually progressing that way. So maybe the only response is to have the whole thing decompose and disintegrate, and let people come up with what they're willing and able to do and support, and what they're not. It becomes privatized. You go where you go. I go where I go. Try to convince me to go otherwise. Try to convince me to attend a competing synagogue or to attend a religious function of a competing movement.
My problem is not with the smart people. The smart people will always know what to do. Whoever someone is smart but decides to go with reform, I'm not going to change his mind. Someone who's kind of going with the flow, that's where this kind of majority of non-leader are tough to...
let me put this a little bit differently.
To deal with.
What brought this situation to where it currently stands is the fact that the Rabbanut is completely opaque. They refused to tell you whose giur they accept and whose they don't. They didn't want an official
opacity list. And privatization are two different problems. They could be one could fix the other. I agree.
Their opacity led to the destruction of the entire system. Basically, what they were telling you is, if you had a giur done in Italy, we reserve the right to accept it or not to accept it. So wait a second. If the rabbi of Rome officiates a giur, they should accept it, which means they should unequivocally accept every giur that he does. They're telling you, well, maybe there's a list, maybe there's not a list, maybe it's on a case-by-case basis. Maybe some rabbis, everything they do we accept, some rabbis, nothing they do we accept, some rabbis, it's on a case-by-case basis. But the whole system is opaque. My neighbor just did giur, she got accepted, she got a passport, she made aliyah. I've been waiting for 5 years and I'm still stuck. And there was no way for you to open this case up. Nobody could force their hand. What the Bagatz did, and again, the Israeli Supreme Court, they make one good decision every 50, 60 years. But the one good decision they made over the course of the past Jubilee was they decided, listen, you can't do that. If someone's considered competent, we want to know his name. That's all. We just want to know his name. And if he's incompetent, it'd be nice to know his name too. If you absolutely, categorically reject all of the gitin, or all of the giurim, the conversions that were done by a certain Beit Din, just let us know. That's all. Just tell us, flat out. You live in Caracas, Venezuela. There's no Beit Din there that's officially competent enough to do this or to do that. Or maybe there is, but at least I know. So if I live in Colombia, I'll move to Venezuela. I'll get my giur done there, and I'll go somewhere. Maybe I can't because it's communist now, but at least you know where you stand. When the Rabbanut was so centralized, and when everything was so opaque, and when these decisions were, I don't know if they were random or arbitrary, maybe they were more political and they didn't want to reveal, we don't like this one because he's conservative, we like this one better because he's orthodox, this one's too modern, this one's more Haredi. So it did become political. It almost came to the point where the Rabbanim themselves weren't being judged on a case-by-case basis. They're being painted with broad strokes. This is modern Orthodox, but he leans Haredi, fine. He's modern Orthodox, but he leans open Orthodox, he's out. And you couldn't get a straight answer, and people's statuses were up in the air for years. People were being tortured. Inoi Hadin. We have such a mitzvah. It's a sur for you to make a judgment take longer than it needs to. People were in limbo, and they were suffering immeasurably. So at the end of the day, what happened was, hey, we're done with the opacity. Open it up. Let people decide what they want. Let people.
I agree 100%.
So I think it's a small victory for liberty, but a big and a meaningful one. And just because it's religion doesn't mean it has to be the Vatican. It's okay if we're a little bit more transparent. We're a little bit more open with people. They know what they're getting into and what they're getting for their efforts, and let them choose if they want to patronize it or not. Not a bad deal. So. Shir B'Sorot Tovot, and with God's help, we should hear of great spiritual and nishmatic enlightenment as a result of our efforts to observe and keep the mitzvot and to keep them free of politics.
Amen.